My name is Kelly DeLambert, and I'm the head of ATS training. We have been doing these virtual open sessions for a few months now, and it's a really good way to demonstrate a little bit about what we do at Airways and some of the processes for becoming a trainee. So to get started, I just thought that I would show you a little bit of the agenda, what we're going to talk about. I'm going to explain who we are at Airways New Zealand. I am going to do what an air traffic controller and flight service operators do at Airways. I'll talk about the selection process. Then once you're successful through the selection process, I'll talk about what the training entails. And lastly, I'll do a session with question and answers. And hopefully you've got some really good questions lined up to see if you can stump me. And as you heard, one of my colleagues, Nick, who's a current controller at Christchurch Tower, is also on the call. Just to see what's happening within the training process since he applied, and he also will be able to answer some questions if I can't answer them. So I'll talk a little bit about Airways New Zealand. Airways New Zealand is actually what we call an ANSP, which stands for Air Navigation Services Provider. There's about 190 of them in the world. Often they're part of a government department, and they work to provide the air navigation services, both aerodrome and surveillance, within an organization. In New Zealand, Airways provides all the civil and military, so we also have a responsibility for Hakia and Whenuapai Towers as part of that. In our flight information region, and within the Auckland Oceanic FIR. And I'll talk about what an FIR is in a moment. We're actually a state-owned enterprise, so we are a fully owned subsidiary of our New Zealand government, but we're operating as a commercial business. So things like New Zealand Post, ACC, Met Service, they're all SOEs like we are. We were the world's first commercialized ANSP, so we got carved off from a government department in 1987. We've been doing well over 20 years of air traffic services training, both within New Zealand and throughout the world. We are the largest airspace in the world, which is 30 million square kilometers, which is about 7% of the surface of the globe. We have over 800 employees across Airways, of which about half are our air navigation services team, or our air traffic controllers and flight services personnel. We have 2 radar centers or surveillance centers that they're often controlled, or en route centers. We've got one in Auckland, operating near the Christchurch Airport, the Auckland International Airport. And we've got one here in Christchurch on Sir William Pickering Drive in Russley. And we do provide those aerodrome services as 18 control towers and airports within New Zealand. So I did mention I would talk about the FIR a little bit. So this is the New Zealand's FIR airspace. So any flights that might travel across the globe from the North American continent or South American continent, traveling to Australia or to one of the Pacific Islands, will often travel through New Zealand's airspace and talk to our air traffic controllers in New Zealand. So it is quite a large airspace. I can never say it's the busiest by any stretch of the imagination, but it is definitely a very large airspace. So in the Christchurch Surveillance Center, we do the smaller bit, the FIR that's around New Zealand, and in the Oceanic Center in Auckland, we cover the airspace that runs nearly up to the equator, down to Antarctica, halfway across the Tasman Sea, and a small way across the Atlantic Ocean, as you can see. Pacific Ocean, as you can see. So a little bit about air traffic control is what we do. A little bit of tongue in cheek here, but this is what often our air traffic controllers, people think we stand at the airport guiding the planes into position, but that's not what we do. Often pilots think we've got the cruisy job, and that's what they think we do. Our children think we're the money earner, and that's what we do. I personally think the people that work around me are very powerful, intelligent, capable people. In other words, Superman. but in reality, this is what we do. This is an image from one of our air traffic control towers with some staff on position, using binoculars to spot aircraft in the distance, talking on cell phones to people either in the aerodrome or emergency services, that kind of thing. So that's what we do in an aerodrome environment, and then we've got the surveillance environment. There's just a
lot of
video
people do
now that
ask
I'll
me
let
the
you
question,
watch.
do I need to be a rocket scientist? Do I need to be super smart at maths? You just got to be a well-rounded person that's got a good amount of common sense. We teach you how planes fly, how helicopters fly and the difference between them. We teach them about the weather, about navigation. You know, what is the pilot actually thinking up there? What's he feeling? What's he going through when you hear in his voice that he's getting bumped around or a bit nervous? I did the training centre quite a number of years ago, and I still text and talk to the guys that are on my course. We all try and catch up and go out for a beer and stuff like that. Because we're all very similar in personality types, we actually get on really, really well, and we joke and laugh and have a great time. Once you get signed off from that, you then get posted to a particular unit. You work at that unit under the guidance of an instructor until the instructor is happy that you could do it solo, and then you get signed off and you get your ATC license. The achievement of getting sign off is quite a big thing. Hopefully sign someone off today, and the whole team is really excited about it, and that person will go home tonight and they will sleep very well, and it will dawn on them tomorrow that they're an air traffic controller, and it will be a massive and fantastic feeling for them.
So that was a short video. I hope you saw it from the start. One of our controllers in Queenstown, Clayton, talking about his role. And as I said, if you look in the links, we have posted some of the videos that you can watch again if you would like to. So this graphic, which you might have seen on our website, describes the different types of controllers that we've got here at Airways. So most people would be familiar with the aerodrome controllers that sit in towers at all of the towers throughout New Zealand, both international towers and domestic towers, and they control an area of within their airspace, which is about 20 square kilometers. They then, when a plane, if this was Christchurch on the left and Auckland on the right, or any other city that we want to talk about, I'll just say Christchurch to Auckland. As they're departing from Christchurch, the aerodrome controller is the one talking to the aircraft till it leaves that control zone. As it gains altitude and is departing from the control zone, it talks to an approach radar controller. So they're looking after a smaller airspace around the Christchurch aerodrome. As they increase in altitude and perhaps at cruising altitude, they talk to an area radar controller who's often called an en route controller. So they pass the messages on the frequency, and the plane then speaks to them. Then they will speak to an approach radar controller for the Auckland sector, which that will be here in Christchurch as well. So they talk to that person who will then pass them on to the aerodrome tower controller in Auckland. So all of these controllers are 5 different roles holding similar what we call ratings, but different validations. So an aerodrome controller holds an aerodrome license and will have a validation to operate at the Christchurch Tower, who will then speak to an approach radar controller who holds an approach radar license with a validation to work in Christchurch approach or Auckland approach. And then we've got en route controllers in the middle. So there are different roles within Airways. Most of our trainees on completion of their initial training will end up being an aerodrome tower controller. Occasionally, they will go direct to area, but that's not as common. There's only been a half a dozen in the last 5 years. So most of them will become aerodrome tower controllers, and most of those will be in regional units. So if you think Palmerston North, Hamilton, Tauranga, Napier, Gisborne, Dunedin, Invercargill, Nelson, Blenheim, those kinds of towers is where most of our students go. They work for 3 years or more. Some of them choose to be tower controllers for life and they never move. Some of them might then move to become an international tower controller and work at a bigger aerodrome like Christchurch or Auckland, or some of them will move into the radar center and work in area radar. And then usually at the end of the career is people with approach radar controllers, which is the busiest roles within the organization. So this next slide does talk about those roles. So I've talked about the aerodrome tower controllers, the area surveillance or the en route controllers, the approach surveillance controllers, and the flight service operators, which I didn't mention. So we've also got roles which we're not recruiting for in this next selection process, but we've got 2 types of flight service operators that operate either in aerodrome. So we have 2 flight service aerodromes in New Zealand at Paraparaumu and at Milford Sound, where they hold a flight service license, not an ATC license, and they provide advice and information, weather, emergencies, talking to aircraft in those 2 aerodromes. And we've got area flight service operators that operate out of our Christchurch surveillance center, but they give information to aircraft flying in uncontrolled airspace as opposed to controlled airspace. And they provide information, advice, whether they can't actually tell them what to do, but they just assist them on the radio. So those are the main roles that we've got here. And as I said, most of our intake will become aerodrome control towers at regional units at the start of their career, and usually for a period of 3 to 5 years. So that's about air traffic control and what we do. The next section was just going to talk about the selection process and what you need to do. So I'll just talk about each of the steps individually. First of all, you need to apply online. Selecting the right person from the start is really important to ensure we train only those people who are likely to be successful. Globally, the statistic is around 2 to 3 people have the competencies necessary to become an ATC. So selecting candidates is really important. So to start with, we get you to provide a application, which is a brief CV and cover letter. And it's really just asking a few questions to ensure you're fit for the job. Things like, are you willing to work shift work? Are you willing to relocate within New Zealand? Are you able to get a class 3 medical, which is an important part? Are you over 20 years old? Because you can't get a New Zealand license until you're 21. So that's the first step of it. For everybody that says yes to those questions and meets that criteria, we then will send you a series of aptitude tests. Now we send these out in 3 lots. So the first sets of tests, and these are links on a computer that we send, and you can do in your own time. So find a quiet space, log on to a computer, you get 1 practice test so you get an idea of what you're doing. And then in your first 2 tests, we give more sort of the mathematical generic skill sets of detailed accuracy, how accurate you are, and what your coded reasoning skills are. And we've got tens of thousands of people that have done these tests. And so we pick people from those who are in, if anybody's done statistics at university, people who achieve higher on a bell curve than others. If you get what we call a Stanine 6 or above in those 2 tests, we then send you the next lot of tests, which are more ATC specific. So some people get knocked out at that stage. So some people, when they apply online, don't get through because they might have criminal convictions that would stop them becoming an ATC. Then we get people into the top end of the funnel and we do those first 2 tests. Some people don't get through at that stage, that they don't have the accuracy or the mathematical coded reasoning that we need. And then we send the next lot of tests, which are the ATC specifics. We look at your spatial awareness, your short-term memory, your relationships, And then we give you a small ATC type skill that talks about your safety, your ability to multitask, etc. So those are 4 tests, which take about another hour to do. And if again, you're successful through those, we send you a personality assessment to see if you've got the personality fit. And that personality fit is looking for things that people, and it's as reported by you, so it's your own, you do about 200 questions. We're looking for people that are decision makers, that are controlling personalities, that are not so relaxed or horizontal, but they've got the vigilance to look at a screen all day or look out a window. So that's the sort of personality assessment. So this step 2 is 3 steps. Some people will get through all 3 of them. Some people only do the first 2 tests. Some people will do the first 6 tests. Once you're through that, we have what we call an assessment center. So this is a 1-day assessment here in Christchurch, where we make sure that, 1, it's you that sat the test, so we get you to repeat some of those tests. We do an individual exercise, so you're there with 5 or 6 other people who've been through the same as you up to that point and scored well. We see how you are in an individual exercise, both a radar and an aerodrome exercise. Then we do a group exercise to see how you work in the group environment, and we do an interview with you at that stage. Airways will pay for people to travel to Christchurch to do that testing, and we will get you here for the day, and we provide lunch on the day for people that have got through to that point. If you're successful through that 3rd stage, we then will do some reference checks. We need to do some criminal checks. We need to what we call a Ministry of Justice and a Ministry of Transport check to make sure that, because the license you get as an air traffic controller is from the Ministry of Transportation. So the Ministry of Transportation needs to make sure that you are what they call a fit and proper person to become an air traffic controller. And there are some things that would preclude you from that with criminal convictions, but there are some things such as minor speeding tickets that they are likely, but who knows, able to look through and accept. Once you're all through all that, you'll be offered a training place on our next course, which is starting in October, which is online for 4 weeks. I'll talk about that more and more, and then starts face-to-face in November. So at the moment, for this first step of this to apply online, the last date for this next course is the 25th of July. So we need everybody to apply by the 25th of July if you want to be sent these tests to be included in an assessment center, which I believe is about the week of the 25th of August. If that's a Monday, we're having the assessment center here in Christchurch, and you would come on one of the last 3 days of that week, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday, and you would come and do a 1-day assessment center on that day. So that's the end of the selection process. Now I'm just going to talk about the training process. So you've been through all that selection, and you then can get offered a place on one of our training courses. Sometimes people might defer, but our preference is that you start in the next course that you're doing. And we usually have an intake in November and April of each calendar year. And we accept 12 people on each of those training courses at the moment. So that's 12 people will start in both April, and 12 people will start, in November this year, and then in April 2023. That's the plan at the moment. When you start, so as I said, middle of October, you'll do 4 weeks of online, self-paced in your own time. We send you a series of resources of readings, assessments, quizzes, stuff that you need to do, and you can do that in your own time. Then you need to move to Christchurch for middle of November, which I believe is the 13th. We have a long weekend in Christchurch for show day, which I think is the 10th. And then you start on Monday the 13th. Don't quote me on those days, they're Mondays. and you do 6 weeks of theoretical training in Christchurch. So during that time, you have 7 exams in 6 weeks. So it's quite intense training. You're in the training center for 6 to 7 hours a day, and you're studying for 2 to 3 hours a night. If you were going direct to flight service, you would then go straight to on-job training, either at Param, Milford Sound, or in our area flight center. But if you're going to become an air traffic controller, you then start your simulation training here in the Christchurch Academy for 25 weeks in our sims. At the end of those 25 weeks, we then do what's called a posting board, and we send you to a tower or a surveillance center where you're supervised by an air traffic controller, where you undertake on-job training for 4 to 9 months. So you have a trainee license, you work under the license of your instructor or your OJTI, as we call them. And the shortest that can possibly be is 3 months. And most of our students take between 4 and 9 months, depending on many factors, including their capability, how busy the traffic is, availability of OJTIs, but it's usually about 4 to 9 months. And as I said, it's most likely at a regional tower. Once you're successful in that, you will graduate as an air traffic controller. You'll receive a New Zealand qualification, and you will receive your New Zealand Civil Aviation Authority ATC license for you to be able to work. I'll now show you a video which will introduce some of our current and past students and provide a tour of our training academy in Christchurch.
Hi there, Sam and others. I'm Alan Gilchrist, an instructor at the training centre here at Christchurch with Airways, and I'm here to start to show you the facilities and the training centre where you'd start your training if successful with recruitment. So come with me and we'll have a look. This is the main reception for Airways in Christchurch, and on this screen it depicts the live traffic in New Zealand at the moment, and your future will involve controlling those aircraft. Alright, we'll go upstairs and have a look at the training facilities. Here in this part of the building we've got the Airways Training Centre, which is part of Airways International. Part of your training will involve radar training, or these days it's called surveillance training, and some of that will take place in a room like this. On this side of the room is where your instructor and you would sit under instruction, and on this side of the room you have where the sim pilots sit and take commands from you or make requests of you as the radar or surveillance controller. Through here we have several classrooms, but we'll take you to one of the classrooms that's currently in use. This one's called Baton. All the classrooms have been named after famous aviators from New Zealand or around the world. And this is one of our active classrooms at the moment, and there's a couple of current students doing some after hours study because we have actually finished for the day formally. All classrooms are set up the same with smart boards, whiteboards and PCs. And then if you follow me now, we'll go down to where the students can take a break and have some R&R between lessons or at the end of the day. So this is the student crew room, as I said, where the students gather in the morning before formal class, break for morning tea, lunch, or spend time after hours and at the weekends. A well-equipped facility to make learning easier, I guess. And if you now come with me, we'll go to another building owned by Airways next door, where there is a aerodrome simulator. So come this way. Okay, well, welcome to the other building that Airways operates out of, and here we're about to have a look at our aerodrome simulator. We have 3 of these, but this one is running at the moment, and I'll just describe it before we go in. They're running an exercise and training staff potentially going to Queenstown. Come with me. In this room you have Airways staff that are driving the exercise. They're acting as simulator pilots for the exercise that's running, and you'll see in a moment it's simulating Queenstown. Right in this area, it represents the control tower. Looks very similar to the way the control tower is set up in Queenstown. And if you view the graphics, and those of you familiar with Queenstown will realise that's what it's simulating.
New Zealand 645, ATR departs, runway 05, clear to land.
05, clear to land, New Zealand, flexible 5.
New Zealand 646, start and push approved. Time now. Start and push approved, 646.
Sierra Lima Alpha is ready line from the 14.
Sierra Lima Alpha behind the landing, A320, hold position.
Just round to your left there, we have an A320 arriving into Queenstown.
It's the heli. Yeah. Sierra Lima Alpha, runway 14, clear for takeoff.
Runway 14, take off Sierra Lima Alpha.
Right, so we've had a look at the aerodrome simulator. We now want to look at another aspect of the job, which is surveillance control. The big difference here is that surveillance control, the controllers are sitting in a building looking at data screens which are displaying data from the aircraft, and they're making their controlled decisions and separation decisions by what they see on the screens. This involves aircraft transiting between aerodromes. Right, so now you've seen our training facilities in Christchurch, understand more about the job, more about the career. If it holds some appeal to you, why don't you apply now?
I was really interested by the opportunity to work in a job where
everything's constantly changing, and you've got to adapt your plan and think laterally about things. And the opportunity to work in a job where you do something different every day, you're not just going in and doing the same thing over and over again, was quite interesting to me. And you know, we've got a pretty good view from the tower especially, and a good group of people to work with, and it's a really interesting job. It's interesting to talk to people who do it, and interesting to talk to people about doing it. So I was very intrigued by those things.
So I thought ATC would be a great way to still be involved in the aviation industry and remain around, especially for my family.
Yeah, I was pretty excited and very happy to start this new career.
So the training centre was quite an eye-opening experience, because I came into it with no aviation experience. I'd never flown before. So it was quite interesting, not just from a standpoint of learning how to be an air traffic controller, but actually learning about how the aviation industry works. The staff at the training centre, all of the instructors were really supportive, all of the support team was really supportive, of course, and it was a really good way to get introduced into the Airways culture and also the industry as a whole.
Managing home life and making time for my family with the amount of study that's required for the course. But everyone here has been really helpful and supportive, so I think it should be fine.
Moving from Christchurch, which was where my family and friends are still, and moving to Palmerston North, where I didn't know anybody. But even that was made a lot easier by the fact that the team here was really accepting. They quickly ingratiated me in and made me feel like I was part of the team, and it made that quite big life step a lot easier than it could have been. On-the-job training was a really interesting experience. The team at Palmerston is fantastic. I think I got really lucky by being placed here. We had the sim to support us, we had a good sim team to help, and of course the training team at Palmerston is fantastic. They put a lot of time and energy into me and my training process, and I never felt like it was me against them, it was always us against the problem. You're going to learn a lot, and you're going to be given a lot of tools on how to deal with things, and you have to be quite versatile in how you apply them, both in an air traffic sense and also just in a life sense. You know, you're going to have to probably move to Christchurch for your training. You're probably going to have to move out of Christchurch for your on-the-job training. You may bounce after that. Your life's going to change a lot in the next 2, 3, 5 years. And you've just got to be open and accepting of that, and if you can embrace that and roll with it, you're in for a great career.
Yeah, so that was some videos of our current and past trainees. I've just put some pictures up here of our website of where to apply. So www.airways.co.nz, and then if you click on apply now, click on products and services, then train for ATC and FIS, which is down here in blue. This is if you want to navigate. Train to be an ATC or flight service operator is the darker one there that you can see. And then I scroll down to become a specialist selection, where it says there, become an air traffic service specialist and find out more. Or you can just type in www.airways.co.nz/ATC apply now. Just some of the training pathways, and I have talked about this, so it won't take long. A summary: everybody comes and does 8051 licensing subjects, which is the 10-week theory course, which 4 weeks you do in your own time and 6 weeks here at the training center. You then come into the training center if you're doing the ATC pathway, and you do 3 full courses, each with checks in the end. So aerodrome control, procedural approach control is a non-radar environment that we have in some of our towers and in fact in some of our surveillance sectors, and you do a surveillance course. And then if you're doing a flight service one, you do the same licensing subject course and you go straight into flight service on-job training. So across the bottom is all the on-job trainings. So this one here is about 6 months shorter than the OJT for the full course for air traffic control. While students study with us, we are New Zealand qualifications approved, so you can get student loans and allowances or study link support, whatever you're eligible for. If you're a New Zealand citizen or permanent resident, even Australians are eligible for some of that. And if you haven't studied at tertiary level in New Zealand before, you can get $12,000 off your first year as a fees-free from the government policy. We do work towards New Zealand qualifications. So all of the courses that you do, your first theory course, it gives you a level 5 certificate. Your sim control courses give you a level 6 diploma of 120 credits. If you went straight to on-job training, you get 140 credits for the flight services. Or if you do on-job training in any of our airdromes or surveillance center, it's a New Zealand diploma at level 7 on the New Zealand qualifications framework. So the last one there was just some questions. So I'm just going to work through the questions that have appeared on the site and just answer them as best as I can. One person's asked as a direct message, could I define coded reasoning? I think look it up and get some examples online, but it's some of those puzzles where, you know, you've got triangle heading north, a triangle heading east, triangle heading west, what comes next? And it'll be one heading south. It'll have numbers 2, 4, 6, 8. What comes next? It's going to be 10. And obviously it'll get a little bit harder than that. So that's coded reasoning. I understand. So go and have a look and do a definition and find out what it is. Another direct message was, what level of math would you need? Because I haven't done any math since year 11. The math that we do in air traffic control isn't tricky math, but it's also often done while you're doing other things. So it's the multitasking with the math, which is what we do in one of those online assessments as well. So a lot of the math that we do is calculating speed, distance, angles, in nautical miles, those kinds of things. And it's not trigonometry or calculus, but it does require you to be able to think quickly and do maths on your feet while you're also trying to solve problems as well. So we don't actually have a specific math requirement, but the maths that we do want you to have, we pick you up through the Sure Select process to see if you could do that. The next question I have is, again, a direct message. Is it possible to reapply, redo the testing if you aren't successful in the first try? You can, but you need to stand down for 12 months. So come back in 12 months and see if anything has changed. Another direct message has been disqualifying criminal criteria. It's a really hard question, and you've given me an example of what you've been involved in. And it's the same with a medical test. For the CAA medical and the CAA fit and proper person, they issue your medical and they issue your license. So as the air navigation services provider, who's the user of that license, we can't determine what is acceptable and what's not. And as an example, I have heard of people who got caught talking on a cell phone from Ministry of Transport, and they told them they needed to stand down because that was making a dumb decision, and we don't want people that make dumb decisions in air traffic control. Whereas something when you were young with criminal convictions, again, I cannot comment on it, and you will need to engage with the CAA for that. To study with me as a private training provider in the academy, I don't preclude criminal convictions or medical conditions. Both of those things are the requirement to get your CAA license. And to do that, you need to discuss it with them direct. Now, I am more than happy for you to send that a further email if I haven't answered your questions, but there's so many things. Some medicines aren't acceptable, some health situations aren't acceptable, color blindness, some of those kinds of things, but we're not the ones that make those decisions. Brandon's asked to everyone, what level of NCA do you need? You don't need a level of NCA, you need to be 20 years old to start. We actually request you're 20 and a half so that you're 21 when you finish, so that you can get your ATC license. But the only thing that I would suggest, if you haven't done any recent study or any NCA, you should do something recent, because it is intense study. You do have to learn a lot in a short period of time, and you have to retain it and apply it. And it is intense study with a lot of information. So the people that struggle the most with that are people that haven't studied recently, either because of age or leaving school early. And if you've not been good at that short-term memory, learning stuff, using study techniques that you might have, my suggestion is it's not about NCA, it's about recent study skills. I've just been asked if you're from outside New Zealand, how can I enroll? Rajnal, you can only apply for this program if you're eligible to study and work in New Zealand. So if you're a New Zealand permanent resident or a New Zealand citizen or an Australian citizen living outside of New Zealand, then you can apply. But if you're not any of those, we still don't have student visas to travel in, and you wouldn't be able to work in one of our towers or study in one of our towers doing on-job training. So that's an international student query, which is completely different from this information session. So if you're not one of those, unfortunately, you can't apply. A direct message of an age limit. There is no age limit to apply except the lower age, because the issuance of an air traffic control license worldwide is 21, and it takes a minimum of a year to get there. And the last thing we want is you to pass and get your New Zealand qualification, but you can't get your license because you're not 21 yet. The upper age limit, there isn't an upper age limit. We can't do that because of the Human Rights Act in New Zealand. But generally, people, the younger that they are, the better they are at adapting to the study. And that's just a fact of the success criteria. And that too is an international criteria, but in New Zealand, we have no upper age limit. The total cost of the course is $14,000 for part 1 for air traffic control and $7,000 for part 2 for your on-job training. So that's the total cost. For flight service, it's $10,000. And that can go on student loans and allowances, and you can get study link support again through student loans as while you study, and we provide some support to you financially during on-job training. Jian has asked, what's the likelihood of new graduates getting hired in towers? It's a really high likelihood, Jian. We can't make promises because employment is not a responsibility of the training academy, but 99% of our students in the last 10 years have all got jobs in towers if they've been successful through their training. It might not be at the training tower they did their on-job training at. It might be at an alternative tower that they get moved to for their job, and they would then be provided with moving support to move to that tower. And with COVID, we had a stand down period, so that we had a period where we couldn't train in the towers because of the risk to our controllers. So we asked our trainees to stand down, go do something else, and then they came back as we were allowed to get people into towers. But at Airways, we're very good at training what we need. So we work very closely with our employer in New Zealand, who is the only employer in New Zealand, and we work very closely, and we only train what they can take on. So in some years, we've only taken 6 or 12 people into courses because that's all they were predicting that they would be able to take into permanent employment at the end of it. At the moment, they're saying that they can take up to 24, hence bringing 24 into the course. A direct message to me is being a pilot an advantage? I would probably say yes through the theory part of the course. The theoretical concepts such as meteorology, navigation, aviation law, you will have studied before, and some of it is very similar. You just have to redo it in an air traffic control concept. So you will have an advantage there. But sometimes we find people that have been pilots are at a disadvantage in the practical part because they have to unlearn what they've done. They're not the pilot anymore. They're the controller, and they're telling the pilots what to do. They're dealing with multiple pilots on their frequency at one period. So it possibly is an advantage for the study. And many of our trainees have been pilots before and come from those roles, but it's not a prerequisite by any chance. I've been asked to everybody, what's the future pathways of an ATC graduate can go on with this course? The potential pathways are really into air traffic control or air traffic services as a flight service role. We do have other pathways within Airways. Once you become an air traffic controller, we want people to become instructors, to become what we call instructor checks or assessors in the unit and examiners. And then we also have a whole lot of promotional opportunities with management roles, chief controllers, safety office, investigations. The company is littered with people in all kinds of roles. You can come and teach for me in the training center eventually as well. So there's lots of roles within the ANSP. Outside of Airways, the roles are probably less what's the word I'm looking for? There's less of them. The CAA will hire some of our air traffic controllers. We have air traffic controllers working in what we call procedure design. So designing the routes that a plane would take to get into a tower anywhere in the world. So that's what we call an Aeropath team. So there are graduate roles outside, but I'm assuming your question was within. But the other part is that Massey University provides students of our graduates of our program with 120 credits for a Bachelor of Aviation Management degree. So that if you're interested in going into aviation management, working in airports, ground control, flight planning, there'd be other roles within the aviation industry that you could go to. But if I'm really honest with you, Gian, and we might have people jump in and correct me here, but most of the people, it's an excellent career, it's stimulating. Most people stay with Airways for a long time. And I think our average length of service for an air traffic controller is nearly 30 years at the moment. So people do stick around in this industry because the benefits and the rewarding career are just that. Matt's asked, those who work in the radar center in the plane area, are they trained as files? Yes. No, not flight planning, but they're flight information. So we don't do flight planning here. The pilots do their flight planning and tell us their plans, and we issue NOTAMs and do that kind of information. But yes, they're trained as flight files. And in this next intake, starting in October, we don't have anybody for those roles. We don't have any vacancies at the moment. Gian has asked if New Zealand ATC ratings are valid for overseas work or only in New Zealand. You do get an ICAO license, and that ICAO license is recognized by all ICAO member states from throughout the world. But usually you need to then be trained as on the local validation. So the same way a controller moving from Auckland to Christchurch They use their ATC license, but they need to get a Christchurch validation for it. So if you move from here to Sydney, it depends on the receiving country, of course, but they would accept your ATC license and they would then validate it as a local license so that you could work there. And we have many New Zealanders that have moved to the Middle East, to Asia, to Australia, North America, working as air traffic controllers. What % of jobs, graduates get a job in the industry? I've answered that already, is 99.9. Interestingly, the only ones that didn't get a job in the industry either didn't fit the Airways criteria or failed a drug test. So we have had people that graduated, got their ATC license, but weren't successful for a failed drug test as an employment requirement, or didn't meet the Airways values because they were fully capable as an air traffic controller, but they might not have fit the values of valuing each other, valuing safety, etc. Rula asked, would work experience make an applicant more preferable over others, as it's mostly based on Sure Select results? Is it's nearly always based on Sure Select results, Rula. So that's our main criteria. If we don't see something in the Sure Select results, maybe communication skills, then we would go to a referee for that. If we thought you had everything else, but you were quiet during the Sure Select assessment center, you didn't offer much, we would maybe validate that through another process. But most of it is the Sure Select results. If you don't get to an assessment center, we would never look at your work experience. So no, it wouldn't. It's really finding those 5% of the people who might get through to an assessment center to be able to start the job. Nathan Hodges asked another question, but I think that's just a comment. So Jean has asked, for applicants applying from an aviation background, will you take flight training into consideration as well? I have a frozen ATPL, the advantage will be. No, your failing sub-subjects will not be a disadvantage. You repeat all the subjects here so that you would come in and redo the training with us, and you would need to restudy the subjects with us. Because they're unit standards and competency-based, we can't do a recognition of mapping because we're not positive that you got all the questions in your ATPL. Blake asked, do simulators help before going through training? I'm not too sure. I wouldn't have done any of the research on that. I wouldn't think that a pilot simulator would help you at all. I think that you wouldn't. So I would just say no to that. If you've done some ATC simulation elsewhere in the world, then yes, it probably is an advantage. A direct question has been, education has been completed outside New Zealand. They got declined because of that. I don't believe that that's the case now. As I said, it's all on your Sure Select results, but the minimum education requirement, because you have to be 20 years old, university entrance in New Zealand only applies to students under 20. So I'm not too sure who declined you last time, but at the moment, I'm not declining anybody based on minimum education experience. I think I've answered direct messages there. Is it possible to apply now and opt in for an April start? Yes, but we probably wouldn't want you to come to the assessment center in July. So you can by all means apply now, and we prefer you deferred your assessment center because we really want to get enough candidates through the assessment center to start in October. If one is a work permit, they can enroll, that's correct. So I turned 20 a month ago. Yes, you can apply for the April course because the April course will not finish on-job training until, sorry, you can apply for the November course because I'm just going to add on the 9 months plus 3 months of on-job training and you'll be a 21-year-old by the time you apply. Average starting pay. An average starting aerodrome controller before shift and that allowances is about $95,000 a year. Is there a pathway to flight service to move to ATC after a while? Yes, there is. And we currently expect that if you were trained in flight service, you would stay in that role for a period of 3 years, and then you can apply for ATC again. What's your academy's current course completion rate? For the last 10 years, we've had a 98% success rate in field training and a 95% success rate in academy training. Nick, somebody else has just asked, was extremely to move to Milford, would that increase my chances? No. The chances of getting where you want rely on so many factors. So the ability to be able to move anywhere is a key criteria. Because for instance, if you came from Tauranga and you wanted to go back to Tauranga, that we have to wait till somebody resigns, retires, loses their medical in that location. And we never know, that takes 1 second for somebody to lose a medical. It takes 30 days for somebody to resign, and it takes us 12 months to train somebody. So we don't know where people are going to go. If a vacancy comes up and it's a hard place to fill, then yes, you would be very keen. So what we do in posting board, so about 6 weeks from your end of your course, we get given where our towers are that we can place people. So if there's 12 people on the course, we get given 12 towers that they can train for, or it might be radar centers. We send that out to all the trainees, and you put your first, second, and third preference, because we know that people who get what they want are more likely to be successful in their training. But I've had 1 year where I had 6 trainees and all 6 wanted one place. So there's no way all 6 are going to get it and get their first choice. In fact, some people only got it as their 6th choice. I've had other courses where they all went to the pub and decided, and they all put down 1 to 12 what they wanted, and they worked it out between them, and let people who had really urgent needs put number 1 first. So, but you cannot have an extremely keen to move to on your criteria, because the chances of getting it wouldn't be great, because it depends on where vacancies are. I've been asked if ATCs are in high demand. I would say yes, they are at the moment. That's why we're doubling our intake. In 2011, we had 1 intake of 5. In 2021. In 2022, we've had 1 intake of 12, and we're looking for our second intake of 12. So they are in high demand. And that's because of this dark art of predicting workforce planning, that they're expecting some increasing number of people to retire or to move overseas now that borders opened up and take some of those overseas roles. So they're looking at, so it is in high demand. If you consider 24 vacancies, high demand. We do, because my actual number, interestingly, is 18 per annum plus or minus 12. That's how we say what we need each year. Rule is asked, is the personnel assessment also just as important as the other aptitude tests? Yes, it is, because we look at certain attributes within the personality test that are really important for ATCs, decision making, those kinds of attributes that we don't want somebody that ums and ahs and can't make a decision, because the whole job of air traffic control is decision making. I've been asked as a direct message, what does an average week look like for an ATC? Every location is different. Most of our regional towers will operate 2 shifts 7 days a week. So you'd be on a morning shift or an afternoon shift, and you work 4 on, 2 off. So that's the standard shift work. And you work probably something like 6 till 1 and 1 till 8. Those would be the kind of shifts. And there might be a chief controller that comes in and does some breaks and stuff for you. What a standard salary for an ATC, I've said, that's the starting salary is about 95,000 a year. It's a bit high if you go direct to radar. And a standard starting salary of a flight service, I think, is about 60,000, but please don't quote me on that. I'm actually not sure. Is the qualification recognized on New Zealand? Well, and you say, I know NCA is not. I mean, I would argue that NCA is our New Zealand national government qualification, the same way that I recognize a Australian or Cambridge, or people recognize it as the tertiary qualification of the country. And this is a New Zealand Qualifications Authority qualification and a New Zealand license. Every government is going to be different. It's up to the receiving country, but most of the countries that have recruited our New Zealanders have taken them on quite easily. Do you guys help at all with relocation? Yes, we do. Not to Christchurch to study, but we do help with relocation for your on-job training posting. And we do a week's from Milliner Tower, and we provide airfares and accommodation for that. But to get to Christchurch, you need to get your own way here and pay for your own accommodation, food, etc. while you're here. And what percentage of ATC are female? Bailey, not enough. Sorry, that was a direct message. There's not enough. Our applications and the number of applications are too low. The number that get through is the same percentage as the number that apply, but I think we're about 10 to 15% female in the air traffic controller world, but I could be completely wrong with that. We're working hard to try to address it, but Sure Select doesn't ask your gender, so we just have to take who can get through. For location preference, will preference be given based on the candidate's performance? Not really, because it's a competency-based system. It's just like a driver's license. We don't say you're a better driver than you. We might, if two people are going for the same role, we might try to match what we think is a better fit with the person's age, the type of instructors, those kinds of things. But everybody just gets a pass-fail in their final performance assessments. Or is it competent, not yet competent? So we don't rank you. We want everybody to be successful, and we work super hard to get everybody successful. But then, no, it's not based on performance. It's based on need and your preference, and we try to meet that as best we can. But as I said in my example, when 6 out of 6 wanted Dunedin as the first choice, there's no way everybody's going to get preference. And then we went just down through what were people's second choice, what is a better fit with the instructors there. What is the salary progression like? Nick Beattie's still on the line. Annually for each year, so the bands go, you start at A1, next year you're A2, next year A3. So the collective has got quite distinct salary banding. Then you've got CPI or whatever the union has agreed as a percentage increase, which is negotiated every 3 years. And then moving locations. So regional towers are band A, terminal radar, terminal surveillance, like my example, Christchurch TMA and Auckland TMA are the top. So they're a band D controller. And then radar and international towers, and there's a few other things at the moment. We've got at band A, B, C, D. So the type of control you do as you progress through, and the number of years in the job, and then the CPI. But there's a collective agreement that is available that would have that information published, that would give you the answers to that. So I do believe there's an annual increment on your anniversary of your getting your first offer of employment. Oh, there's Nick just said. Nick, I don't know if you want to turn on your mic and answer that one a bit more. Let me just go through and see if there's any. Cambridge is recognized overseas. Somebody, that's just a comment. How can you compare the aptitude test and the test for the assessment center? Jan, there isn't really. I mean, maybe go online and search for coded reasoning tests. I understand, I probably shouldn't say this, but the NATS, which is the British system, has got some pre-testing to show you what kinds of stuff they do to see if you've got the aptitude to go through it. but I think they might charge people to be tested. That's why they get people to figure out beforehand. And it's not going to be the same as ours, because ours is a uniquely Airways product. But no, you can't prepare for it. The people that we get through, you can't ever look at somebody and their background, their history, and say they can do it. We've had people that have been baristas that have gotten through, and we've had people that have been A380 pilots have got through. There is nothing that would say why. It's just people's natural aptitude, natural personality that has the skills for being able to control aircraft, communicate with them, act safely, and that's what the Shore Select is out for. And we don't know, we know what we want, but we just cannot predict somebody from a CV, hence why we do those 7 tests before. Rohit has just put in the qualification prerequisites. That's what we have to have as an NZQA qualification. It only applies to people under 20. And we don't say that. So if you don't have those qualifications, I don't ask you for them. That's for people under 20, which is a requirement for registering a qualification on the framework, which is the UE stuff, which is the same as what they've got for anybody going to university. But if you're over 20, you get in with adult entry. I think that's about all that I've got in the questions. Nick, did I say everything right about salary progression?
Hi there, everyone. My name's Nick. I'm a controller at Christchurch International. I've been doing the job since about 2008, first at the Harker Air Base, and now at Christchurch for 12 years now. Yeah, I think you're pretty much spot on with almost everything there, Kelly. I'll quickly brush over anything that I sort of saw that was perhaps not quite what I sort of see in the field. In terms of pay and progression, I think Kelly sort of highlighted that you're sort of starting at about $95,000 New Zealand at the very starting out as a band A controller at a regional unit, and it quickly progresses every year, approximately about sort of $3,000 a year. When you become an instructor and you start doing OJTI out in the units, then there's additional payments as well. And if you get recalled because of the shift work, then there's quite a hefty payout per recall, and you get extra days in lieu. Long story short, it's a lucrative career, considerably more so than anything you're going to get from a first year sort of a job out of university. It does pay well. It pays well around the world. There is a worldwide shortage. Controllers are desperately needed. There's another question before. I think someone asked about what sort of percentage of our workforce, controller workforce, is female. When I worked at a Harker Tower, it was probably about 33%. In Christchurch Tower here, we have a team of about 24. And again, about a third of them are female. So it's quite a lot. And the girls do just as well as the guys. Yeah, no dramas there. Are there any other questions or bits and pieces you thought that I should have a look at there, Kelly?
No, I think that was all.
There's one thing I would sort of say, because I can remember thinking back many years ago when I applied, and it was sort of a daunting prospect. Absolutely, you give it a go. I've worked with a great many controllers. I've instructed a great many controllers. I've instructed at the training college. I think out of all probably the hundreds of air traffic controllers I've met, one left the job because they didn't like it. Most people really like it, and for the vast majority, it's their dream job. Once you become a controller, there's nothing else you want to do apart from maybe teach it or instruct it. It's an amazing job. Yeah, once you've got that, once you've got your air traffic control rating and you are actually doing the job and you're away, it's like nothing else. It's a special role. So why not you? Why not now? Because if you're doubting yourself and you think, it's daunting, you don't know. Go through the aptitude tests, go through the personality tests, and find out. Because I know people who you would have thought, okay, I've fighter pilots who don't have the right stuff, and a waiter who did. So yeah, take the tests, find out. If any questions or queries you guys have got, throw them down the bottom. I'll do my best to try and answer them as well.
There's a couple more questions there. Can I postpone my entry? I think I've talked about that one. Yes, you can absolutely apply now and do the assessments, do the testing, but if you get invited to an assessment center, ask if you can delay till the next one. Sophia's asked, have you ever been in control and seen an accident while you're working? I'll let Nick come back on and do that. I'll just answer another one. Do you have to do retesting like pilots? We have to do yearly flight tests as an instructor. You do have to do an annual check. We call it an APR. You do one after 6 months when you first get your license, and then you do an annual performance review. Every year you do get checked to make sure. And also, if you're away from the role for more than 28 days, you have to do what we call COPT. You get checked again. And if you're over for more than 5 months and 29 days, you have to actually revalidate on your job. Do you need to be doing advanced problem solving while on the job by calculating relative velocity? I'll let the problem solving that I was thinking of is when you're doing it is that there's all kinds of problem solving. That is the job, is that you're looking at a radar screen, you're looking out the window, you're looking at your strips, you're trying to get flights in, putting people into circuits. You're always doing problem solving on the job. Whether it's advanced and you put under pressure, yes, but it's mostly about working with what you've got in front of you. And that's what we teach you at the training center. We teach you how to say no, that when you've got 6 pilots all calling up at the same time, what do you do? How do you put them on hold? How do you send them into a circuit? You know, those kinds of things. So we teach you that. So, but you're not, I mean, in a procedural course, you're having to do some calculations and stuff, but we teach you how to do it. That is part of the training. That the math that you're doing is, you know, as an example, you know, doing 360 degrees and telling somebody to turn left, you know, 10 degrees, those kinds of things. You're doing flight levels, how much higher, how much lower. But it is constant problem solving in the job with trying to figure out what you're doing with all the planes on your frequency, provide a safe, expeditious flow of traffic within your area of control. I think that's it all, except Sophia wants to know if Nick's the closest he's come to something yucky that he's experienced in the job with an accident or near miss.
Yeah, okay. So been a controller since 2008. You do see emergencies, but make no mistake, you are very well drilled in dealing with abstract emergencies, with emergencies that you would expect to see. I've seen a great many at a Haki Air Base. When I was there, we still had fast movers, which are the Mackies, so fighter jets, and things go wrong often with those sorts of aircraft in the way that they were flying them. I have witnessed a mid-air collision up there. Both pilots were okay. It was the Red Checkers aerobatics training team doing formation flying. So it's actually, they're in controlled airspace, but we're not actually keeping those particular aircraft apart. And the pilots made a small error, and they did touch into one another. Both came back, they landed, and they were okay. So yeah, that was And I can tell you, anytime that you hear an emergency on frequency, it does wake you up when you hear those sort of words, pan, 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 engine fire, or, you know, worse still, mayday, mayday, mayday. It wakes you up. You absolutely react, but you are trained to react. With any of you out there who fly a single engine aircraft, it's you know, if you fly long enough, eventually you have an engine failure and that aircraft is going down. I've seen that a few times. To be honest, any air traffic controller will tell you that in a weird way, and I said that sounds bad, but you're almost willing or wanting something terrible like that to happen. I know it sounds bad, but it's so you can react, so that you can do the job, and so that you can help deal with an emergency. What we kind of call a state of awareness. You are vigilant and scanning and looking for that kind of thing. You're listening to the pilot's voices. So yes, you do deal with emergencies, but you are very well trained to deal with them. I hope that kind of answers that question.
The last question, we do need to wrap it up. I can see quite a few people have dropped off. The last one, we were asked, how do you say the work-life balance is like? Is the kind of career where you'll have to do some paperwork studying after office hours? I truly believe that either the work-life balance during your training isn't the greatest, because it is quite intense, both in the academy training and in the field training, that we do need to get through that training, and there is a lot to learn, and it does need to be committed to memory and being able to apply it. Once you're a rated controller, I reckon it's one of the best jobs in the world for work-life balance, that you work the shift work, which frees you up for other times. Many of our controllers have been Olympians, own farms, have got small businesses on the side, are hugely involved in their kids' schools, on board of trustees. They've got the ability, working around their shift work, to have an excellent work-life balance. So it is not a job where you take your work home at night with you, but it definitely is that while you're studying. And if you retrain, if you move to another tower, if you move to the radar center, then you will have some paperwork studying after office hours, but most of the paperwork can get done as part of your shifts. And coming to do extra courses like instructor courses or examiner courses would be as part of your role. So you would travel to do those, and that would be part of your role. Okay, I'm going to wind it up there. We do have an email address, which is trainingadmin@airways.co.nz. If there's anything that we haven't covered off here, or anything that you think of after this, do know you can go back and listen to this recording. Close date for applications is 22 July if you want to be considered for the next intake, with an October start date for self-directed and November here in Christchurch. Please get your applications in by the 22nd. For those of you that want to defer, don't say anything until we call you to attend an assessment center. At that point, say, can you do the next one? Okay, I think that's all from me. If there's anything else, I look forward to receiving your emails. So thank you, everybody. Enjoy your evening.